At work, Tom and Jack were chatting. Tom: Jack, I've been attending evening classes for 8 months now, and I have a test next month. Jack: Oh, Tom, for example, do you know who is Thomas Edison? Jack: No, Tom, he's the inventor of the light bulb. If you take evening classes, you would know this. The next day, the same discussion took place. Tom: Do you know who Gandhi is? Jack: No. Tom: He's the key architect of Indian independence. If you take evening courses, you would know this. The next day, once again. Tom: And do you know who J.K. Rowling is? Jack: No, Tom. She's the author of the Harry Potter series. If you take evening courses, you would know this. This time, Jack got irritated and said, And do you know who is Kevin Johnny? Tom: No, Jack. He's the guy roaming with your wife every day. If you stop evening courses, you would know. Joe grew up in a small town, then moved away to attend college and law school. He decided to come back to the small town because he could be a big man in this small town. He really wanted to impress everyone. He opened his new law office, but business was very slow at first. One day, he saw a man coming up the sidewalk to his office. He decided to make a big impression on this new client when he arrived. As the man came to the door, Joe picked up the phone. He motioned the man in, all the while saying, No, absolutely not. You tell those clowns in New York that I won't settle this case for less than $1 million. Yes, the appeals court has agreed to hear that case next week. I'll be handling the primary argument, and the other members of my team will provide support. Okay, tell the DA that I'll meet with him next week to discuss the details. This sort of thing went on for almost 5 minutes. All the while, the man sat patiently as Joe rattled instructions. Finally, Joe put down the phone and turned to the man. I'm sorry for the delay, he said, but as you can see, I'm very busy. What can I do for you? The man replied, I'm from the phone company. I came to hook up your phone. 3 desperately ill men go to their doctor seeking help. One is an alcoholic, one is a chain smoker, and the other is gay. The doctor tells the men if you indulge in any of your habits again, you will die. So the 3 men leave, and then the alcoholic sees a bar and hears its loud music and can't resist. He orders a shot of whiskey, drinks it, and suddenly drops dead. The other 2 men walk outside, realizing how serious this is. But then the chain smoker sees a half cigarette on the ground still burning, so the gay guy says to the chain smoker, If you bend over to pick that up, we were both dead. The father said, Top of the morning to her. Aren't you Mrs. O'Donovan, and didn't I marry you and your husband 2 years ago? She replied, Aye, that you did, father. The father asked, And be there any wee little ones yet? She replied, No, not yet, father. The father said, Well now, I'm going to Rome next week, and I'll light a fertility candle for you and your husband. She replied, Oh, you thank ye, father. They then parted ways. Some years later, they met again. The father asked, Well now, Mrs. Donovan, how are you these days? She replied, Oh, very well, father. The father asked, And tell me, have you any wee ones yet? She replied, Oh, yes, father, 2 sets of twins, and 6 singles, 10 in all. The father said, That's wonderful. And how is your loving husband doing? She replied, He's gone to Rome to blow out your fucking candle. Antardian goes into a souvenir shop and asks the man at the counter if he has any alligator skin shoes. The man said, Yes, right over there on the shelf. He walks over to the shelf and then back to the counter where the shop owner was sitting and says, The shoes cost too much. The shop owner says, Well, go and see if you can find some cheaper. The Antardian leaves the store. The shop owner, on his way home, notices a dead alligator by the swamp. He pulls over, walks to the swamp, and notices the Antardian standing in the middle of the swamp. The man asks him what he is doing in the swamp. About that time, the shop owner sees a giant alligator coming up behind the Antardian. The alligator and the man go under the water. The Antarctian comes up and drags the alligator to the shore. He looks at the alligator's feet and says, "This one doesn't have any shoe either." A tourist and his trail guide were walking along a path when all of a sudden the guide runs up the hillside to a cave, yells, "Woo woos," listens for a moment, and goes charging into the cave, stripping off his clothes on the run. He returns in about 15 minutes. The same scenario occurs again, after which the tourist asks about this strange behavior. The guide explains that if one of the young ladies of his town is in an amorous mood, she goes into a dark cave. If she hears woo, woo, she responds woo, woo to signal that she is ready and willing. No one knows who is who, and everyone is happy. The tourist is amazed and asks if he might partake in this local custom at the next cave. The guide doesn't see any problem with this. At the next cave, the tourist runs to the entrance and calls out, "Woo, woo!" To his delight, he hears a sonorous and enticing "woo, woo" sung back to him from the recesses of the cave. He takes off his clothes, rushes headlong into the cave, and gets run over by a train. One day, a wife playfully asked her husband, "Honey, what if I agreed to always listen to you and do everything you say?" Suddenly, her husband burst into laughter and fell to the floor, rolling around. Worried, the wife rushed over and asked, "What's so funny? Are you okay?" Catching his breath, he replied, "I just realized that even in my wildest dreams, that's never gonna happen." Old Bubba was fishing along the bayou for catfish one day when he spots a water moccasin slithering across the water with a toad in its mouth. Being a longtime fisherman, he knows the best bait for large catfish are toads. In a flash, Bubba grabs the snake from behind, carefully removes the toad from its mouth, and puts the toad in his side bag. Fearing the angry snake would bite him, Bubba grabs his bottle of Daddy's moonshine from his pocket and carefully pours 2 drops into the snake's mouth. The snake's eyes glaze over and quickly go limp. Bubba carefully places the snake back in the water. A few hours later, Bubba is just about to head back home when he feels something tapping on his leg. He looks down and is amazed to see the same water moccasin with 2 frogs in its mouth. My wife had been after me for several weeks to varnish the wooden seat on our toilet. Finally, I got around to doing it while she was out shopping. After finishing, I left to take care of another matter before she returned. She came home and prepared to take a shower. Before getting in the shower, she got undressed and then sat on the toilet. As she tried to stand up, she realized that the not-quite-dry epoxy paint had glued her to the toilet seat. About that time, I got home and realized her predicament. We both pushed and pulled, without any success whatsoever. Finally, in desperation, I undid the toilet seat bolts. She wrapped a sheet around herself, and I drove her to the hospital emergency room. The ER doctor got her into a position where he could study how to free her. Try to get a mental picture of this. My wife tried to lighten the embarrassment of it all by saying, "Well, doctor, I'll bet you've never seen anything like this before." The doctor replied, "Actually, I've seen lots of them. I just never saw one mounted and framed." A New Yorker was forced to take a day off from work to appear for a minor traffic summons. He grew increasingly restless as he waited hour after endless hour for his case to be heard. When his name was called late in the afternoon, he stood before the judge only to hear that court would be adjourned for the rest of the afternoon and he would have to return the next day. "What for?" he snapped at the judge. His Honor, equally irked by a tedious day and sharp query, roared out loud, $20 contempt of court? That's why." Then, noticing the man checking his wallet, the judge relented. "That's all right, you don't have to pay now." The young man replied, "I know, but I'm just seeing if I have enough for 2 more words."